A single dad hired a babysitter for his twin daughters, unaware she was the CEO's daughter in disguise. "I'm sorry, Mr. Evans, but your application has been denied." The rain hammered down against the window panes of the small apartment, a relentless drumming that mirrored the frantic thudding in Leo Evans's chest. Each drop that slid down the glass seemed to trace the path of a new worry, a fresh wave of quiet desperation that threatened to pull him under. He sat at the worn kitchen table, the cheap wood cool beneath his trembling hands, and stared at the flickering light of the single exposed bulb overhead, a lonely star in his dimming universe. The silence in the room was heavy, broken only by the storm outside and the soft, even breathing of his twin daughters sleeping in the next room. Two innocent souls blissfully unaware of the financial storm raging around their tiny, fragile world. He felt the biting cold of the draft that snaked in from the poorly sealed window, a physical manifestation of the fear that was now a constant companion. It was a hollow feeling, a gnawing emptiness in the pit of his stomach that no amount of cheap pasta or stale bread could ever fill. He had failed again. The rejection letter on the table was crisp and impersonal, its stark white paper a cruel contrast to the threadbare, faded blue of his shirt. Another job he wouldn't get, another door closed, another hope splintered into 1,000 tiny pieces. He had been an architect once, a creator of sturdy, beautiful things, but since his wife, Clara, had been taken from him by a sickness as sudden as it was cruel, his own life had felt like a poorly constructed building, its foundations cracking under an unbearable weight. Now he took whatever work he could find. A day of labor here, a small repair job there, but it was never enough to outrun the shadow of the mounting bills. He clenched his jaw, his knuckles white as he gripped the edge of the table. He had to be strong. For Maya and for Mia, his two little girls who still saw him as a hero, a giant who could fix any broken toy and kiss away any nightmare. He could not let them see the cracks in their giant's armor. He had to keep going. That evening, the storm had not yet broken when he found himself at a bus stop, the air thick with the promise of a downpour. In his pocket was the last of his money, just enough for the bus fare home and a small carton of milk for the girls' breakfast. The sky was a bruised purple, and a raw wind whipped through the street, carrying with it the scent of wet asphalt and decay. He saw her then, a young woman huddled under the flimsy awning of a closed newsstand. She was soaked, her expensive-looking coat clinging to a frame that seemed far too fragile for the harshness of the world. Her face was pale, her dark hair plastered to her cheeks, and her eyes, when she looked up, were hollow, haunted things, filled with a profound, unspoken sorrow that he recognized instantly. It was the same look he saw in his own reflection on his worst days. He didn't know it then, but this was the moment that would change everything. Her name was Serafina Vance, though he would not know that for a very long time. She had just fled a cavernous, sterile mansion where her father, a man who built empires but could not mend a broken heart, had tried to solve her grief with a checkbook. He wanted her to fund a new wing of a hospital, to chair a gala, to put their name on something polished and permanent. It was his way of dealing with the loss of his son, her younger brother, Daniel, a year prior. But for Serafina, the grief was not a project to be managed. It was a raw, gaping wound, and her father's attempts to pave it over with philanthropy felt like an unbearable violation. So she had run, into the impending storm, with no phone and no wallet, just a desperate need to escape the suffocating weight of her gilded cage. She was lost. Leo watched her for a long moment. He saw the way she shivered, the slight trembling of her chin that she was trying so hard to control. He saw his own pain reflected in her eyes, the shared, universal language of loss. A moment of internal hesitation gripped him. He thought of his daughters, of the milk he needed to buy, of the long, cold walk home if he gave up his bus fare. The thought was a sharp, painful pang of self-preservation. But then he looked at her again, at the sheer, desolate loneliness radiating from her, and his own hardship seemed to shrink in comparison. His heart, a muscle made strong by love and grief, made the decision for him. He walked over, his step steady and sure. He held out his worn, faded umbrella, a small shield against the world's cruelty. "You look like you need this more than I do," he said, his voice gentle. She gasped, a small, sharp sound, and looked up at him, her eyes wide with disbelief. He then pressed the crumpled bills from his pocket into her cold, unresponsive hand. For a taxi. It's no night to be out in this, he offered a small, sincere smile. He was giving away his last few dollars. Serafina stared at the money, then back at his face. His eyes were kind, weary but kind. There was no calculation in them, no expectation. In her world, every gesture was a transaction. Every kindness a down payment on a future favor. This was something else entirely. It was pure. It was selfless. It was a light in a darkness she had thought was absolute. A sob caught in her throat. I can't, she whispered, her voice cracking. Please, he insisted softly. Just pay it forward someday. Before she could protest further, the first fat drops of rain began to fall. He gave her one last nod, a gesture of quiet solidarity, and then he turned and began to walk away, pulling the collar of his thin jacket up against the now pounding rain. She watched him go, a gaunt figure disappearing into the sheets of water, the umbrella a sturdy black dome in her hands, the crumpled money a sacred weight in her palm. A seismic shift occurred deep within her. The ice that had encased her heart for a year began to crack. She didn't know his name, but she knew with an undeniable certainty that she had to find him. He had saved her. The walk home was brutal. The rain soaked Leo to the bone, a biting cold that seeped deep into his weary muscles. By the time he reached the apartment, his teeth were chattering uncontrollably. The girls were still asleep, their small faces serene in the dim light. He managed to change into dry clothes before collapsing into a fit of shivering, a deep, hacking cough rattling his chest. He had caught a chill, a bad one. For the next 3 days, a fever raged through him. He lost a crucial day labor job he had lined up, the one that was supposed to pay the rent for the month. The landlord, a man with a face like a clenched fist, had slipped a preliminary eviction notice under the door. The paper felt like a death sentence. Despair was a heavy fog, threatening to suffocate him. He looked at his daughters, their innocent faces full of trust, and knew he couldn't give up. He had to find a way. He needed help. Swallowing his pride, he posted a simple, desperate ad online. Single father of twin 6-year-old girls needs a kind, reliable babysitter for a few hours a day. Can't pay much, but can offer a warm home and endless gratitude. Meanwhile, Serafina had returned to her stately prison. But something within her had been fundamentally altered. The encounter at the bus stop had reawakened her. That man's selfless kindness was a beacon. Using the vast resources at her disposal, she began a quiet, meticulous search. It wasn't hard for someone like her. A quick check of security cameras from a nearby bank, a facial recognition scan cross-referenced with public records. It was cold, corporate work for something that felt so deeply personal. Within a day, she had his name, Leo Evans. She learned of his wife's passing, his former career, his current struggles. And then, she found the online ad. Her heart pounded in her chest. It was a sign. This was her chance not just to repay him, but to understand the source of his goodness, to be near the quiet strength that had so profoundly moved her. She created a new identity. She became Sarah, a simple, unassuming student looking for part-time work. She bought a wardrobe of plain, second-hand clothes, a pair of thick-rimmed glasses, and practiced pitching her voice to be softer, less commanding. She sent him an email, her fingers trembling slightly as she typed. I saw your ad. I don't need much money. I just love children and would be happy to help. Leo was stunned when he received the email from Sarah. It seemed too good to be true. He interviewed her over a crackling video call. She looked young, sincere, and a little shy. Her eyes, behind the large glasses, seemed gentle. He explained his situation with a dignity that belied his desperation, telling her he could only afford a pittance. That's perfectly fine, she said, her voice soft and unwavering. I'm more interested in the experience. He hired her on the spot, a wave of cathartic relief washing over him. Sarah started the next day. The moment she stepped into the small, clean apartment, A strange sense of homecoming washed over her. It was a world away from the polished marble and sterile silence of her father's mansion. This home was small and a little worn, but it was filled with an almost tangible warmth. Children's drawings were taped to the refrigerator. A stack of library books sat on the coffee table, and the air smelled of cinnamon and something indefinably comforting. It was a home built of love, not money. Her secret interventions began almost immediately. They were small things at first. A bag of groceries would appear on the doorstep, with a note claiming it was a delivery mix-up from a neighbor. Leo, too exhausted to question his good fortune, would simply accept it with gratitude. Then, a box of beautiful, barely used children's clothes arrived, supposedly from a church donation drive Sarah had heard about. She would accidentally leave behind a high-quality flashlight with expensive batteries, or a brand-new, fluffy blanket that she'd claim was a gift from an aunt she had no room for. One afternoon, Leo came home to find the flickering lamp in the living room replaced with a new one, its steady, golden glow filling the room. Sarah just shrugged and said she'd found it on sale and thought it would be safer for the girls. Each act was a carefully placed stone, building a bridge of support around this family that had captured her heart. She saw the relief in Leo's eyes, the way the deep lines of worry on his forehead seemed to soften just a little. And with each anonymous gift, a piece of her own shattered heart began to mend. She wasn't just helping him, she was saving herself. The bond between them grew in the quiet moments after the girls were asleep. They would sit at the small kitchen table, sharing a cup of hot tea, the silence comfortable and deep. One evening, the rain was pounding against the window again, a familiar rhythm that seemed to invite confession. Leo was staring into his cup, his shoulders slumped with a weariness that went beyond physical exhaustion. "She loved the rain," he said suddenly, his voice thick with unspoken emotion. "Clara. She said it was the world washing itself clean." Sarah listened, her gaze steady and unwavering. She didn't offer empty platitudes or tell him to be strong. She just listened, creating a sacred space for his grief. He began to talk, the words pouring out of him in a raw, unfiltered torrent. He spoke of Clara's laugh, of the way she would dance with the girls in this very kitchen, of the unbearable silence she had left behind. He spoke of his fear of forgetting the small details, the scent of her hair, the exact shade of her eyes. It was a vulnerable, heartbreaking monologue, a testament to a love that death could not diminish. When he finished, his eyes were glistening with unshed tears. He looked exposed, fragile. Sarah didn't say a word. She simply stood up, refilled his tea, and placed the warm cup back into his hands. The simple, gentle gesture was more comforting than any words could have been. It said, "I see you. I hear you. You are not alone." Then, in the soft, amber hue of the kitchen, she began to speak. Her voice was barely a whisper. "I had a brother," she started, the words feeling foreign and heavy on her tongue. "His name was Daniel." She told Leo about her bright, funny, adventurous younger brother, the one person in her gilded world who had felt real. She told him about the rock-climbing accident, the sterile silence of the hospital, the way her father had immediately tried to channel their shared tragedy into a new business venture, a foundation, a legacy. She spoke of her profound loneliness, of feeling like a ghost in her own life, haunted by a memory no one else seemed willing to sit with. She confessed that his kindness at the bus stop had been the first genuine human connection she had felt since Daniel was gone. They were two souls, adrift on the same ocean of grief, who had found a life raft in each other. He reached across the table and placed his hand gently on her shoulder. The contact was brief, but it sent a current of warmth through her entire being. A bond had been forged, unspoken but undeniable. The opportunity for the scholarship at the prestigious Blackwood Preparatory Academy had come out of nowhere. A social worker, impressed by the twins' intelligence during a routine check-in, had recommended them for a new outreach program. For Leo, it was a lifeline, a chance to give his daughters the future he and Clara had always dreamed of. He spent weeks helping them prepare, his heart swelling with a mixture of pride and terror. The final hurdle was an in-person interview with the headmistress, Mrs. Albright, a woman known for her exacting standards and intimidating presence. Leo wore his only suit, a garment that was clean and pressed but undeniably worn, the fabric thin at the elbows. Sarah, wanting to offer moral support, insisted on coming with them. She dressed in her usual Sarah disguise, simple jeans, a plain sweater, and her large glasses. She felt a knot of anxiety tighten in her stomach as they approached the school's ornate, wrought iron gates. The building was a stately, Gothic structure of stone and ivy, a monument to old money and established power. Felt like walking into another world. The lobby was cavernous, with polished marble floors that echoed their footsteps and portraits of stern-faced benefactors lining the walls. Mrs. Albright emerged from a heavy oak door, a tall, impeccably dressed woman with a severe haircut and eyes that seemed to miss nothing. Her gaze swept over them, lingering for a fraction of a second too long on Leo's threadbare suit and Sarah's simple clothes. Her lips thinned into a disapproving line. The interview was a brutal affair. Mrs. Albright's questions for the girls were fair, and Maya and Mia, bright and confident, answered them beautifully. But her questions for Leo were laced with a subtle, cutting cruelty. She inquired about his employment status, his living situation, his ability to contribute to the school's community fund. Each question was a thinly veiled judgment of his poverty. The humiliation began in earnest after the interview, back in the grand lobby. Another family, dripping with designer labels and an air of effortless entitlement, was waiting. Mrs. Albright, in a voice loud enough for everyone to hear, turned to Leo. "Mr. Evans?" she began, her tone dripping with condescension. "While your daughters are clearly bright, Blackwood is more than just an academic institution. It is a community. We require a certain level of parental involvement and contribution." Leo stood frozen, his face pale. He understood her meaning perfectly. The other family was now openly staring, their expressions a mixture of pity and disdain. The headmistress continued, her words like sharp little stones. "Frankly, I have serious concerns about your ability to provide the stable environment our students require. We cannot have our scholarship students feeling out of place. It would be a disservice to them, and to the school it was a public execution, a deliberate act of cruelty designed to put him in his place." He felt the blood drain from his face, a cold shame washing over him. He could feel his daughters pressing against his legs, sensing his distress. He remained dignified, his back straight, but inside he was shattered. He had brought his children here for a better life, and instead, he had exposed them to this heartless elitism. The weight of his failure was unbearable. He opened his mouth to speak, to defend himself, but no words came. Total silence. Then, a soft click echoed on the marble floor. Sarah stepped forward. She took off her glasses, and with that one simple motion, her entire presence shifted. The shy, unassuming babysitter vanished, replaced by a woman of quiet, commanding authority. Her posture straightened, her chin lifted, and her eyes, now clear and focused, held a glint of steel. She looked directly at the headmistress. "Eleanor," she said, her voice calm but carrying an undeniable power that cut through the heavy silence of the lobby. "That is quite enough." Mrs. Albright froze, her mouth slightly agape. The use of her first name, spoken with such casual authority from this plainly dressed young woman, was a shock to her system. I beg your pardon?" she stammered. "Who are you?" Sarah's lips curved into a smile that held no warmth. "My name is Seraphina Vance," she announced, her voice resonating in the cavernous space. "My father is Alexander Vance." A collective gasp went through the small audience. The Vance name was practically royalty in the city, and everyone knew Alexander Vance was the single largest benefactor to Blackwood Academy. He was the chairman of the board. Mrs. Albright's face went from smug to ashen in a heartbeat. The color drained from her cheeks, leaving behind a splotchy, panicked red. Miss Vance?" she stuttered, her composure completely splintered. "I had no idea. I apologize." Seraphina held up a hand, silencing her. You should not be apologizing to me, Eleanor. You should be apologizing to Mr. Evans, a man whose integrity and character are worth more than this entire building. She turned her gaze to Leo, and her eyes, which had been so hard and cold, softened with a profound tenderness. Leo Evans is the kindest, most decent man I have ever met. His daughters, Maya and Mia, are brilliant and compassionate, and they deserve to be here more than anyone. She turned back to the stunned headmistress. As of this moment, the Vance Family Foundation is establishing a new, permanent scholarship in the name of my late brother, Daniel. It will be called the Daniel Vance Beacon Scholarship for children of exceptional character. Maya and Mia Evans will be its first recipients. It will cover their full tuition, uniforms, books, and all associated fees, from this day until their graduation. My father will be delighted to ratify this decision at the next board meeting. The reversal of power was absolute, the silence in the lobby now one of pure shock. The entitled family stared, their jaws slack. Mrs. Albright looked as though she might faint. Serafina ignored them all. Her focus was entirely on Leo. She stepped closer to him, her heart pounding in her chest. The time for secrets was over. Leo, she said, her voice now soft, for his ears only. I am so sorry. I should have told you everything sooner. His face was a mask of disbelief, his mind struggling to process the seismic revelation. The soaked woman at the bus stop, the kind babysitter, this powerful, commanding figure, they were all the same person. Sarah? He whispered, his voice cracking. Why? Tears glistened in her eyes. Because you saw me, she said, her voice thick with emotion. When I was invisible, when I was lost, you saw me. You gave me your last dollar, your only umbrella. You saved me that night, Leo. You reminded me that there was still goodness in the world. I wanted to be near that goodness. I wanted to learn from it. She took a deep, trembling breath. When I lost my brother, my world went dark. But you and Maya and Mia, you brought the light back. You gave me a purpose again. I didn't want to be your savior. I just wanted to be part of your world. If you'll let me, he stared at her. This incredible woman who had turned his life upside down in the most miraculous way. The desperation, the fear, the years of struggle. It all seemed to melt away, replaced by a hope so bright it was almost blinding. He saw not a wealthy heiress, but the woman who drank tea with him in his kitchen, who read stories to his daughters, who had listened to his grief with an open heart. He reached out and took her hand, his touch steady and sure. Sarah, he said, using the name he knew best, the name of the woman he had come to care for so deeply. You already are. 1 year later, the golden glow of the late afternoon sun streamed through the large picture window of a house that was both stately and warm. It was a house Leo had designed himself, a masterpiece of wood, glass, and stone that seemed to grow organically from the hillside it rested upon. He was no longer taking odd jobs. He was now the head of his own architectural firm, a boutique practice funded by a grant from the Daniel Vance Beacon Foundation, specializing in designing beautiful, sustainable, and affordable community housing. He was building homes for people who needed them, a purpose that filled him with a quiet, profound joy every single day. The living room was filled with the sound of happy chaos. Maya and Mia, now 7 and thriving at Blackwood, were building an elaborate fort out of cushions and blankets. And in the center of it all was Serafina. She was no longer hiding behind glasses or plain clothes. She was radiant, her laughter echoing through the house as she helped the girls secure a blanket with a clothes pin. She was their Sarah, their stepmother, the loving heart of their newly formed family. Leo stood in the doorway, watching them, a soft smile on his face. He felt a gentle hand on his arm and turned to see Alexander Vance standing beside him. The powerful CEO, who had once seemed so intimidating, now looked at Leo with an expression of deep respect and gratitude. The two men had forged an unlikely bond, united by their shared love for Serafina and their dedication to honoring Daniel's memory through the foundation. You've made her happy, Leo? Alexander said, his voice gruff with emotion. Happier than I've seen her since, for a long time. She made us whole, Leo replied simply, his gaze returning to the woman he loved. Later that evening, after the girls were tucked into bed, Leo and Serafina sat on the back porch, watching the stars begin to prick the deep velvet of the night sky. A soft blanket was draped over their shoulders. "Do you remember that first night?" Serafina asked softly, leaning her head on his shoulder. "In the kitchen? In the rain?" "I remember everything," he said, his voice a low rumble. "I remember thinking you were an angel." She chuckled. A quiet, happy sound. "I was a mess. You were the angel, Leo. You were the one who performed the miracle." He turned to look at her, his eyes full of a love so deep it was almost overwhelming. "No," he said, tucking a stray piece of hair behind her ear. "We were just two broken people who found the missing pieces in each other." He leaned in and kissed her, a tender, sacred promise under the vast, starlit sky. They were home. This story is a fable, a testament to the idea that a single, selfless act of kindness can echo through the universe and return 100-fold. It speaks to the profound truth that our true worth is not measured by the contents of our bank accounts, but by the depth of our compassion and the unwavering strength of our character. Leo, in his moment of greatest need, chose generosity over self-preservation. Serafina, trapped in a world of sterile wealth, was saved not by money, but by a simple, human connection. Their journey reminds us that even in the darkest of storms, a small light of kindness can show us the way home, and that the greatest riches in life are the love we give and the hope we inspire in others. If this story touched your heart, if you believe in the power of serendipity and the redemptive force of love, please take a moment to reflect on the quiet heroes in your own life. Think of the strangers who have shown you unexpected kindness, the friends who have sat with you in your grief, and the family who provides the unwavering foundation of your world. These are the threads that weave the beautiful tapestry of our shared human experience, and they deserve to be cherished. We invite you to join our community of story lovers by liking this video, sharing it with someone who needs a message of hope, and subscribing to Soulful Love Tales. Your support allows us to continue creating more soul-stirring narratives that celebrate the very best of the human spirit. Click that subscribe button for more heartwarming and inspiring stories that remind us all that love is the most powerful force in the universe. We'll see you in the next one.